Sometimes your calendar just knows. Phil Kessel is a Stanley Cup champion! And the Penguins are too. Less than 12 months, less than 365 days, and what a difference it makes. The HBK line, Hagelin, Bonino, Kessel, none of those guys were Penguins before the season began. Not to mention the Penguins were 9th in the Eastern Conference as of December 12th of this past season, and as a result, they fired their head coach Mike Johnston. Side note, on the exact same date, the Sharks were 10th in the West. First place in the East and second place in the entire NHL, Montreal. Things can change for the better and things can change for the worse. Keep your head up. The Penguins are a great example of what it takes to win in the Cap era. Or I guess there's lots of methods you could use to win the Cup, but I think this is going to be one of the more common ones in years to come. You got your guys, okay? And if you're a Cap team, you can have like 4 or 5 of those. Crosby and Malkin are paid, and for good reason. Then you got Phil Kessel, Chris Letang, and Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury, he didn't even play. Well, then that gets to another thing that you need to win the Cup, a little bit of luck. If you are going to pay those guys, if you're going to have those stars on your team, you need to be smart about filling out the rest of your roster and getting cheap but effective depth. And it's hard to find good players who don't make a lot of money because literally every team is looking for that. It's not just having your cake and eating it too, it's having your cake, eating it too, and not having to pay for it. You got Brian Rust, who became like a folk hero in Pittsburgh until Connor Sheary took his place by scoring an overtime winner. Guys like Tom Kuhnhackl, and a young whippersnapper by the name of Matt Murray. I remember making my playoff picks. I remember right before the playoffs began, the Penguins were taking on the Rangers, but I found out Marc-Andre Fleury was going to be hurt. I'm like, maybe I should pick the Rangers. The Penguins began this journey with Jeff Zatkoff, guys. They showed him in the Black Aces segment on Hockey Night in Canada. I'm like, no, that guy played. And it's not just about the youth. It's about guys like Matt Cullen, who has been around forever and was such a key piece for Pittsburgh. Through the first round and a half, looked like he could be a Conn Smythe candidate. So you got to be good, you got to be smart, and you got to be lucky. This year's Pittsburgh Penguins were all 3. And saying that they're a bit lucky isn't an insult. You know what? Sometimes you make your own luck. Sometimes those cheap and often mismatched little pieces of your team, you can get the most out of them with the proper coach. Right around Christmas time, you got a Christmas present in Mike Sullivan. The Penguins really don't care. They fire the coach whenever they want to go on a cup run. They touch the Prince of Wales trophy, which is strictly forbidden. And they go out and win with proven not winner, Phil Kessel. How do they do all these things? And I know a lot of the people watching this aren't Pittsburgh Penguins fans, but if you're a hockey fan, you got to appreciate some of the stories on this team. Trevor Daley and Pascal Dupuis, even though both were hurt, obviously to different extents. Olli Mata and Phil Kessel are both cancer survivors. Chris Letang had a stroke like 2.5 years ago. Nick Bonino went from seemingly an unwanted journeyman to Bonino. On and on and on. You know, Patrick Hornqvist can play for my team any day. What a feisty little unpleasant player. Oh, and Evgeny Malkin having a child in the middle of the Stanley Cup final who was 7 pounds 1 ounce. He wears 71. God, I hope they didn't make that up. Not the fact that they had a kid, that's kind of hard to make up. I mean the weight. Question that I always wonder every single year. Have any of the Penguins gone to sleep yet? And who will be the last Penguin to go to sleep? I'm thinking you win the Cup. You raise it above your head, you go all crazy, you put your baby in it, you take all kinds of great pictures, and then you go crazy in the locker room. Again, you get on the plane for the first 2 hours, and then you remember that it's like a 5 or 6 hour flight from San Jose to Pittsburgh. So after about hour 2, you kind of conk out for a little bit, and there's your rest. But then as soon as the plane lands, you get right back up and you go nuts again, because then there's all these people at the airport going, you go, right back. And then it's nighttime, and you're certainly not going to go to bed the night after you win the Stanley Cup, so you for a little while longer. And then I think the morning after that, you finally go to sleep. Unless it's the parade. Then it's right back to, not just, it's on a float. Or like a fire truck. I don't know what the Penguins budget is. But enough about Penguins fans for just a moment. The San Jose Sharks and San Jose Sharks fans. God, you waited so long to get to this very point. You made it to the Stanley Cup final 2 wins away. Joe Pavelski is a legitimate all-world star. You wanted to see a vet like Patrick Marleau win it. You wanted to see a vet like Joe Thornton win it just so his beard didn't engulf his face. What if he has to keep it now? And Brent Burns, he's probably going to keep it anyway. Except next year he'll dye it camo or something. Can you imagine? Not to mention the guys who were cast off from the Leafs. They went from 0 to the Stanley Cup final. Nick Spaulding, Roman Polak, James Reimer. I feel sad for James, but you know what, buddy? You're going to get a payday this summer, and you earned it. Someone on Twitter by the name of DTSB_98 tweeted me, he's probably in the dressing room telling bad jokes and smiling at everyone, trying to cheer them up. I bet that's exactly what what James Reimer was doing. He's like Kevin from 30 Rock, but with goalie equipment. Sharks fans, as a Leaf fan, I get that feel, bro. I get that heartache. Well, okay, maybe not the specific feel on account of my team hasn't been to the Stanley Cup Final since 1967, but I get it. And who knows, the Leafs always find a way. And speaking of which, Penguins fans, very happy for you. You look very happy. Look at you. Look at you all rosy-cheeked today. I bet you're so happy. I bet that was a really long 7-year wait. That was probably really long, those seven years, yeah. And I look at how joyous the celebration is, and I look at how big the party is, and how much everyone is celebrating, and I can't help but think of how it will pale in comparison to Toronto. The Leafs will just be crowd surfing up and down Yonge Street. Drake will be performing on one side, the Tragically Hip on the other. Norm Kelly, Santa Claus, and the entire cast of Hey Arnold will be there. Why Hey Arnold? I don't know, I just kind of like that show. At least that's how this scenario always goes in my dreams. You know what? I think it'll be like that if any Canadian team manages to win the Cup. And speaking of the Canadian teams, now this is your time. I mean, you and the Columbus Blue Jackets, this is your time! Because now it's time to focus on the draft, and free agency, and Austin Matthews, and Steven Stamkos, and all that crazy stuff. No. There will be a time for that, and that time is momentarily, but for now, congratulations to the Pittsburgh Penguins. You have the best player in the world, Sidney Crosby, and fight me if you disagree. You have the best story in the hockey world right now, and that's Phil Kessel, and fight me if you disagree. And the Penguins won the Stanley Cup. Nobody can disagree. So congratulations, enjoy your day, and go have a hot dog. Go have a bunch of them. Apparently they're good for you. He was the team's leading scorer.